There's something particularly special about diving at unknown wrecks, and that's an order of magnitude greater when it's a submarine. They're also notoriously difficult to identify, as there's almost no external clues as to their identity. So to identify a submarine, you've normally got to go down prepared to scrub the props. And this Gasparado's trip from 2021, that's exactly what we aim to do. Our team was divided up into each person had a different task. Mine, with my buddy Wills, was to get down there and attack the prop. We'd done it already on a previous submarine, so knew exactly what to expect. The only difference this time was it wasn't 70 metres, it was 85. Fortunately, conditions for the dive were absolutely stunning, both above and below the water. So that makes for a great video, which I think you're really going to enjoy. And ahead of you is us getting down and realising it isn't a World War II submarine after all. You're also going to see us getting to the prop and having to remove huge quantities of net before we can get to it. Before that, there's a little incident I have on the way down. My CO2 alarm goes off and I actually end up getting back out of the water. And you're then going to see us swimming around the rest of the wreck and getting some wonderful photos of the inside of the conning tower. So this is a lovely, lovely dive and a great video. So sit back and enjoy. As always, if you fancy giving us a like, that would be really appreciated. And don't forget, you can also now join my channel if you really want to support what I do. Now, I've already mentioned that I had a CO2 issue on the dive. So what you're actually seeing here is me getting in for the second time. You can probably see that the boat is empty. You can see that my buddy is there in the water. And he's actually been sat there for about 15 minutes. This is Will, good mate of mine. We've done loads of diving together. And absolute credit to him. He sat there and waited for me while I got out of the water, took apart my unit, sorted it all out, and then got back in again. And what I've done is the bit about the CO2 alarm is at the end of this video. So if you're interested in that, you can leap forward and obviously use the chapters on the video. But this first bit now is purely focused on the on the dive. But it is effectively my second dive of the day. I got to 6 meters on the first one. But here we are in the descent, and I guess the first thing you could probably see is the water is really, really green. And this didn't bode particularly well. It also doesn't fit in particularly well with the fact that I told you that conditions were amazing. So the good news is, as we get down, this green layer that's in the top, I don't know, 10 or 15 meters of the water is going to vanish, and it's going to become absolutely crystal when we get down there. So that was great. That was great when it happened. But at the moment, we're in the green layer and we're on the way down. Will, who's been sat there for 15 minutes waiting for me, I suspect is really, really keen to see us go down. And we obviously have a job that we're going to do together. And I would say this, I guess, but of all the jobs on this dive, ours scrubbing the props is probably the most important, because that's where the information to identify it is probably going to come from. So to roll back, I've already said that there was a team of us going down on the dive, and different people had different things. Ours was to go down and see if we could scrub props. Some of the other guys were looking. There was believed to be some identifying marks potentially on some of the stuff around the conning tower. And at this point, we thought what we were going to do was a World War II Mark 7 submarine. That was, I'm not 100% certain where that information had come from, but it was what we thought we were dealing with. Now, there's been a slight change of protocol here, because Will and myself were meant to put the lazy shot in. And in fact, we got the lazy shots on the shot line. We just never got down and put the prusik on. When I got back to the surface, I told the other guys, and they sorted it all out. So everything was okay, and our tags are already on, which is why you don't see us putting them on now. Obviously, you've got to be really careful with these change of protocols, because they can really easily mess things up. It's why I went to great lengths to explain what was happening when I got to the surface, and it all worked out well in this particular case. Everybody knew what was happening. Anyway, back to the dive. So just to quickly understand where we are, you can see it's about 40 miles give or take, southwest of Plymouth in the UK. And for those of you who like that, put on a globe, you can see another map. There you go. That's our home port, Plymouth there, and that's us where our sub is out there. So in the middle of the English Channel, and quite a happy hunting ground for submarines in both wars. So lots of mystery stuff out here, lots of unknown ships, and lots of submarines. Well, not lots of submarines, but certainly submarines that still haven't been identified. So it was entirely feasible that this could be a German World War II or a World War I submarine. But we were definitely going down expecting to find a World War II one. But that's the kind of nature of this kind of diving, is you never know what you're going to get. So a bit like a box of chocolates, to quote Forrest Gump. What we've got here, though, is some divers who are heading back up. Now, normally on really tidal sites, this is a bad thing because it means that something's gone wrong, which obviously it has in this particular case. Fortunately, not the end of the world for us today, but hey, it's not a good drill and is to be avoided wherever possible. But anyway, what you can see, though, is we've got below that really, really green bit, and you can see strobes down there. You can see divers' lights on the wreck, which is absolutely fantastic. You can also see there's no current as well. So the divers going down which is Will and myself, we've moved off the shot line to allow the divers coming up to stay on the shot line, and that's kind of good drills. What you can also see here is that we've got our strobes out. We're going to put our strobes on. That's also good drills because we want to know where the shot line is. I mean, actually, as you're going to see, the conditions down here are absolutely fantastic. So probably didn't need those, but once again, it's one of those SOPs. And then you can see, you probably just heard me there, just seen the submarine, and it is fantastic. You can see there what the visibility is like. You can also see that I've identified which way is the stern, and maybe that's one of my issues. I didn't pause to admire how wonderful the wreck was, how stunning the conditions were. I was all about the job. So let's get to the stern. That hatch there is into the engine room, almost certainly. In fact, it is into the engine room, and interesting that there's no hatch cover on it. So what happened to that? You can't imagine that these things would get ripped off unless it was open. So that may be a clue, but I'm not focused on that now. I'm now focused on getting to the stern, and you can see that the submarine is already tapering. So this is a small submarine, and as we come over, you can see it's also slightly on its port side. As we come over the top here, there is just nets everywhere, and that's not great, because underneath those nets is where we need to be. That's where we need to be scrubbing. And you can see there I've deployed my dive knife, and people always say that, oh, that's pathetic, you need a big one, but as you can see there, it's making fairly short work of that fairly thick fishing net, cutting through it. But obviously as I do that, it just instantly there's all sorts of silt and stuff caught on it, and that gets kicked up. Now obviously with a fishing net, you've got the kind of the fibers of it, but then there's a big bit of rope that kind of holds it all together, and you can see there that's what I'm currently trying to work my way through. I mean, I guess that's probably, I don't know, several centimeters thick. You can also see that I tell Will that I've done enough there. He can start to get in and he can start scrubbing. He's the guy with that white string bag with all the kit in, and off he goes. Now, for those of you who don't know submarines or props on submarines, I guess it's a fairly niche piece of knowledge, is there are normally 3 blades, and in between one of those 3 blades are some numbers. The numbers will tell you what type of submarine it is. They will often may even have the individual submarine details on there, because they were supposedly for each submarine, and they'll also give you some date information as well. So while Will's doing that, though, I've decided to come around the other side and to see if I can see the other prop, because it might be that the other prop is easier to get to, even though it's on the downside. Now you can see me coming around here. That big thing I kind of pushed off on was the stern torpedo tube, and you can see me there. I'm having a look at the prop, and you can see that is completely buried. We're not getting in there. You'd need to shift all that dirt and stuff out of the way. So frankly, that isn't really happening. So having realised that there's no point going and having a look at the second prop, or the port prop. I'm now going to go back and see how Will's getting on, and you can see he's kind of been hard at work. He's a commercial diver, Will, so he's used to scrubbing props, and in fact the stuff he's using there are actual tools for scrubbing props. So he's kind of hard at work. You can probably see down on the seabed there, that looks like the hydroplane. Every time I do a submarine video, I use a term and somebody picks me up for it and tells me that I've got it wrong. So I'm slowly learning the correct terms for submarines, but I think that was definitely a hydroplane on the seabed there. So this is me pointing to Will to where he needs to be scrubbing. And I think Will is telling me that he can't find any numbers on it, which is obviously upsetting. You see what he's using there is like an ice scraper. The ice scraper gets off the biggest bits of concretion that are on the prop, and then you can then use the polishing thing, hopefully, to get some more detail. So that's what Will is doing. And when we did it before on the U95, and if you've not watched my U95 video, you definitely should do. I'll stick a link in for it. But when we did it, we're really lucky. The numbers were on this bit of the prop, so they were the easiest one to get to. And as soon as we started doing it, you started to see them, which was really good news. Now, Will and myself are both looking kind of expectantly and anxiously at this to try and see if there's anything there. And I think we're realising that there isn't, which is really upsetting because something's beeping there. I think that was probably Will's. Not sure what it was, but he's clearly not that fussed, and he's resuming attack. That big circular thing is the thing that you're meant to use for scrubbing props. It's like a big sort of scrubber that you would use for dishes or something like that. Actually, it's not really that good. What we could really do with is a wire brush. That'd be much better. Now, Will's obviously said there's no numbers on there, so what I'm going to do now is try to get underneath, and you can see that's where there's even more of this net is in the way. So the only way I'm going to be able to get through it is to do what I'm doing here, which is doing even more cutting. So my trusty dive knife is out again, and it's cutting away. You can see once again that's destroying the visibility, but it's the only way. It's the only way we're going to get through. Now, those of you who've been watching the computer in the bottom left-hand side will see. Obviously, we've got quite a good mix for this depth. So gas density is pretty good, which is fortunate because we are obviously working quite hard down here. You've probably also seen that I've been down, coming up for 11 minutes now, and I've got about 40 minutes of TTS. First stop is at 27 meters, so that's kind of racking up quite nicely. You can also see that I am, I'm getting through this stuff, but it's clearly hard work. Now, those of you who've seen some of my other videos will know that we came back and we dived this submarine again. And when we dived it, we came back with much better tools for cutting our way through this rope. So the ghost fishing guys, they have to deal with this problem all the time. And what they actually use is pipe cutters for going through these really big, thick bits of rope that nets, old-fashioned nets like this, are made of. So you can see my knife, my little remora there, which I love to bits, by the way. It's kind of... It's working okay, but it's not super easy. But anyway, there we go. I am getting through the net. What I do know though is at the other end of this net is going to be another one of those thick bits of rope. So I'm kind of girding my loins, prepared for that. Now, this probably isn't the greatest bit of video, me kind of hacking away at this sort of stuff, but I think. So Will's just talked to me again there, and I think what he said is that there's no numbers on the top bit. So that's just kind of confirmation, which isn't great. You can see there I'm clearing more net out of the way, and that's basically what I ended up doing for most of this dive. That is quite hard work. For those of you who've never done any kind of exertion at depth, working at depth on a rebreather is really kind of quite hard manual effort. It does take it out of you more than it does if you were doing probably the same activity much shallower. I guess, when you talk about worker breathing on a rebreather, the not only have you got to work, you've got to push the gas around your loop, you've got to push it through the scrubber, and all the time you're generating more CO2, so your body has got more CO2 naturally in it in the bloodstream. So it's not one of those things they particularly recommend. But anyway, we ain't going to identify this submarine unless we get into the prop. So there we go, and that's obviously in the list of people who jobs people volunteer for. Everyone's quite happy to be the person who takes all the photographs. Nobody normally is particularly keen. Now something interesting has happened here. You can probably see that I have taken off my dry glove, and you can probably also see that although not particularly well, is what I'm doing is I'm taking out the little. I've got a little piece of surgical tubing that goes between the inner seal and the dry glove. So during the cutting, I've managed to puncture my dry glove somehow. So what I've done is I've removed the dry glove, removed the little tube that maintains the pressure in my dry glove, and then what I've done is I've refitted the dry glove. So clearly, what I've now got to add to my woes is a soggy left hand. Fortunately, because I've removed the little tube, it hasn't gone up my wrist too far. You probably also saw that whole sequence was done and dusted really quickly, and it is because it's a well-drilled manoeuvre on my part. You probably saw that I used the knife to actually lever it off. Will is waving the scrubber around for reasons that are not particularly clear. Don't know why, but I think he's probably trying to get in there into that other blade. So I guess if you consider the prop as a clock face. One face is probably at 11 o'clock. This one down here is probably about 4 o'clock, and therefore it's the next easiest one to get to. So once I've got rid of this bit of net here, then Will's going to be able to get in on it and attack. What we're really hoping is that this is the one that will have it on, because if it doesn't, the other one is far, far more difficult to get to. I guess that's probably in about the 7 or 8 o'clock position, so it's going to require getting underneath. So a bit of communication between us there. What Will is trying to say to me is that his fin has come off. So somehow that's his fin's come off, and the reason he's no longer scrubbing is he's gone over there to put his fin back on. I have no idea how that happened. But anyway, there we go. These things do happen. So he's going to sort himself out and then come back. I guess he probably would prefer me to be helping him, but I think I'm so focused on the chopping that I haven't realised that his fin has come off. So that's why I'm not helping him. But hey, he manages to do it himself. People who watch my other videos will realise that I have actually published this video before. When I published it, though, it was done without any narration or any kind of context, so it was literally just the raw video. So hopefully you won't feel cheated by me publishing it a second time, because I guess for the added bonus director's cut edition, you've got my commentary, you've also got the computer on the screen as well, so you can see my TTS, you can see what depth I'm at, all those kind of things. So I think that's enough to warrant doing it again. In particular, I think the explanation to give you the context of what's going on, because I know bits like this, for instance, are just really, really difficult. What I'm doing here is actually going underneath. Now, you probably saw the skeg was above me there, which is the bit that stops a submarine banging on the seabed. And what I'm doing now is clearing the way so I can get all the way under to that third blade. So I'm basically on the seabed, trying to get underneath the skeg, just getting rid of the rest of the net. You can see the vis is completely gone, but equally I've also cleared out an awful lot of the net. And in a bit I am going to come out, and you can kind of see how much better it looks than when I first started on it. But before that happens, there's some more net to be dealt with, and you can also probably hear Will again. And there's me. So for those of you who've never dived a rebreather, those kind of those sounds, you can to a certain extent talk through a rebreather, and that's what I'm obviously what we're doing there. Now it's not particularly easy to understand, but you can communicate a bit. And because we're so close together, we can hear each other really well, and you can even hear it on the Paralenz, which is the camera that's taking this video. It's mounted on my mask strap, so that's why you're kind of getting the head footage. This was before I had two video cameras on a helmet. This one is the original Paralenz dive camera plus as well, rather than the more modern Vaquita, so it's why the quality's not quite as good as some of my most recent videos. But I have to say, I like this video because it's it really shows what's going on. I think it shows the amount of effort that we put in, although I think we've now got to the point where we've given up on trying to scrub the prop anymore, and what we've decided is that it's time for us to get a bit of footage so that we can record what we found. And I think we're both fairly tired at this point as well, and we also want to go and see what the rest of the wreck is like. So as I did in a lot of these dives, I'm videoing and I've got my stills camera. For some reason, I've only got a single video light. In fact, I know why it was. At this period in my diving, I was having loads and loads of problems with video lights. These were really, really cheap Chinese ones, and they were rubbish, so they'd often fail, and that's clearly what's happened there. But hey, it's okay. And what I'm doing is using to get as many photos as I can. And actually, some of the photos I got were pretty decent, such as this one here. That's the rear firing torpedo tube. Obviously, it wouldn't have been sticking out in the open like that. It would have had the casing around it, so not the pressure hull, but the kind of the outer skin that by and large gives a submarine a shape. That would have been round it, but because normally that's quite thin metal, it falls away and vanishes, so you end up with only the kind of really solid bits like this torpedo tube sticking out. And I think one of the interesting things about rear firing torpedo tubes is actually they were surprisingly effective. I think I read one particular incident of a submarine skipper, it might be Hans Rose actually, where he fired some torpedoes out the front and another one out of the rear pretty much at the same time and sunk two ships, which is pretty impressive stuff. The other thing that's impressive is, I don't know if you saw there, the flashing lights on the shot line, and I think what that does is just shows how fabulous the visibility is. So even this submarine, this will be 50 or 60 meters long. The fact that you can see the strobe that's got to be 20 odd meters away, I think is just really, really impressive. The other thing that's quite impressive is that you can see there I'm taking photos without a video light, so there's enough ambient light down here for me to actually get some fairly decent quality images, which, once again, considering we're 80 odd meters right out in the middle of the English Channel, is really quite impressive. And the second time we came back to dive this submarine, it was actually even better than this. So by comparison, and if you haven't watched that video, you definitely should do. And the reason you should watch that video is because we went back and we scrubbed the prop again, and we didn't find anything on it. So there we go, I've kind of slightly spoilt it for you, but it did allow us, I think, to have a much better understanding of what the submarine was, and we have tentatively given it a number. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the submarine was, but if you want to find out, you can go and watch my other video. Meanwhile, we're kind of heading to the conning tower here. You can see Will has hung his white bag with all his tools. He's hung that on the lazy shot. Somebody's strobe is actually on the deck, and Will is obviously pointing out some stuff to me. That looks like one of the pressure ballast tanks on the seabed. That's obviously the conning tower. Will's having a good look inside it, and it was absolutely fabulous inside the conning tower. There was all sorts of gauges and engine telegraphs and portholes and all sorts of stuff. I mean, the question as to why there are two big holes in the conning tower is one that I address in detail in my next video. So I have my own theory on how these got there. Not everyone agrees with it, but if you want to know what that theory is, you should definitely listen to my other video. But this is obviously me sticking the camera in there, getting some photos, and you've seen some of those photos at the beginning of this a bit of this video. That big dial in front of me there, that is a depth gauge. There's an engine telegraph off to the left, and there's actually another one to the right as well. Obviously, like most submarines, it did have two engines. Well, I guess four engines. Had two diesel engines, and it had two electric engines as well. So one for each prop. And we've already seen that there's two of those. So for those of you looking at my computer, you'll see I'm just getting close to 100 minutes TTS, and as always with the dives off in deep, our maximum runtime for this is going to be 2.5 hours, so 150 minutes. So I'm keeping an eye on that. Just getting a bit of a photo of Will there, who I think has found some ready-use shells. Like all submarines of this era, they had the deck gun that was outside the pressure hull, and one of the things they wanted to be able to do was get it firing really quickly. So they would keep shells underneath the kind of the floor. So that's in between the pressure hull and the outer casing. So they would be able to, lift up the bits of wood or whatever. They'd be able to get out the shells. The shells would be in protective bags that would prevent the seawater or whatever getting to them, and then they could obviously load them and fire them straight away. Other bits and pieces you can see. Okay, so that's me looking at the gun there with a lovely crab on it, and getting some getting photos of it. One of the interesting thing about this gun is obviously it's pointing to the stern. And that forms part of my theory about what happened to this submarine. It's not everyone agrees with it, and it's something I discuss at quite a lot of length in the other film of this dive. You've probably seen there that I've managed to turn my video light into red there when I was trying to get it on. So the other thing you can see is the TTS is mounting here. So I'm up to about 100. The total runtime at the moment is about 130 odd minutes, so that's getting really close. And anybody who's listened to any of my chats about TTS will know that I normally assume that I'm going to save a bit when I accelerate it with the PO2, and I'm going to lose a bit because of the fact I'm not going to follow I'm not going to be at the right depth for exactly the right amount of time. So it's a bit of a balance trying to decide when to leave bottom, not least because the skipper always gives me a hard time if I smash the runtime. So I know that I'm going to I've got to be careful of that one. So that's why I'm here by the conning tower, which is quite close to the shot line, and therefore I can just kind of run down the rest of my dive and get up fairly. Get to the shot line fairly easily and get up, and that's kind of what I'm doing now. I've just seen something on the seabed there. You can probably see I've spotted it. Looks like a bit of brass, and it's just it's kind of some sort of elbow, or I guess, which is a bit disappointing because clearly outside the conning tower would have been other bits and pieces. So it would have been there would have probably been a compass up there, there would have been a helm up there. Many of those things would have had some sort of identifying features on them, so they're not there, that's what I kind of hoped it would be. Very briefly, it wasn't, so that's a bit disappointing. But hey, there we go. Now the other thing I've not done, which you may ask why, is I've not really been forward of the gun. And that was one of those things I kicked myself about afterwards. I don't know why I didn't, because I had plenty of time to do it, and I should have done it rather than taking all those photos of the gun. And if I'd have done that, what I'd have found is that there's a whole load of mine tubes further forward. So this was a UC Mark II or UC Type II World War I German mine-laying submarine. Incredibly successful submarine type. In fact, this type of submarine has sunk more ships than any other submarine in the history of the world. So they were super effective. Don't know what it is there, a piece of brass. And once again, I'm surprised I didn't bring that up, because it may have helped. There we go. God, goodness know where Will is off, but he clearly is not paying any attention to the runtime. So I'm just telling him that I'm heading up, because I am paying attention to the runtime, and I know that I'll be in trouble from the skipper. But I think Will's heading back as well, so he's off to have a look at the periscope there, which you saw me taking some photos of it earlier on. There you go. One final photo of Will. In fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to take the eye photograph. These I just love these things that you can still see the optics in a periscope after so many years. And this is obviously the photo that I started this video with, and so it was pretty much the last thing I did as part of this dive was to get that photo, looking deep inside. And I wonder who the last person to look out at that periscope was and what they saw. You know, it's kind of incredible. So this is what we're looking at here, is the top of the conning tower. It would have, once again, it'd have had an outer casing on it. The casing would have gone much further back, so the stuff on the ground here, those kind of vents and stuff, would have all been part of that. That elbow I found on the seabed was probably part of it, but that's all obviously long gone. And here you go, you can see us getting back to the shot. I've come up a bit, so slightly minimising the deco. It was Will's strobe down the bottom. Here's mine. You can always recognise my stuff because by and large it's got a bit of green tape on it. I'm going to get that on me, and then I'm going to get myself up as quickly as I can, because you can probably see there I'm showing well, a total runtime would be about 156 minutes, so I'm going to need to kind of sort that out, otherwise I'm going to be in trouble with the skipper. Not that the skipper really, you know, he doesn't mind that much. Well, he's going to give you a bit of shtick about it, but he'd much prefer people to be safe and all those kind of things. What he doesn't like is divers who just take the mickey and stay down there all the time. And you can see today the water is 15 degrees C. I mean, this is October, so it's the warmest time of the year. So even at 70 metres there, it's 15 degrees C. So this is going to be lovely for deco. And that horrible green layer that we saw earlier on is going to be even warmer. That's what happens. I think it's 16 or 17 degrees or something like that. So, you know, absolutely lovely temperature for doing your decompression, certainly by UK standards anyway. So you can see I've chopped the video a bit there so that we're now much shallower. You can see it's starting to water's still quite clear, but the light is green because obviously of all that stuff above us. There's the lazy shot, and you can see that my tag is the only one left on there. I'm just getting those make quite nice photos, I always think. So I'm getting a photo of Will there. You can see my shearwater's telling me that I've come up a bit shallow, but it's all good. It's just that yellow warning, and it's gone now. So just time for a few more photos of Will and the lazy shot, which you can see is under a little bit more tension now. So a sign that the current is picking up. So I'm going to come in there, I'm going to take my tag off, and then I am going to release it, and we're going to start drifting, which will be a relief, no doubt, to all the other divers who are above us. And remember, when we were going down, the other divers are coming up, so some of them have probably been on the lazy shot now, hanging on the lazy shot for nearly 30 minutes, and it's okay as long as the current's not particularly strong, but once the current picks up, that gets quite uncomfortable. So they'll be really pleased that we've released the lazy shot and we're now drifting in the current. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to quickly show you my deco profile, because I know people enjoy that. So here it is, fairly standard dive profile for me. I guess probably the most interesting bit is you can see the first bit of the dive is quite deep, and that's obviously when I was on the seabed, and then I come up there to be actually on the submarine. I drop down right at the end to pick up that valve, and then I start my ascent, and ascent is pretty much as you expect. You see I swapped to from 1.3 to 1.5 there, and then obviously accelerates. There's a bit of a wobble there at one point, not sure what's going on shallow, but other than that, bog standard dive profile, and come out about 7 minutes over the brief run time. So I get a telling off from the skipper on the way home. Now, the other thing you recall that I promised you is actually the first dive. So you remember the one I've shown you is the second dive. This is the first dive when I get in, and everything seems normal. Obviously, you can see conditions are great, and this is the one on which I am going to have the CO2 alarm. So you'll see that in a minute, and I'll talk you through what happens. But at this point, all seems normal, and I've done a pre-breathe. I've done all my checks, all the normal kind of stuff. And it's probably worth mentioning that obviously we've travelled a huge amount of time to get here. Will and me have got an important role. In fact, part of the role is putting on the lazy shot. So there it is. Will's got that on. It's dropping it down, and obviously we are heading now. So I'm just checking that Will's okay. He is. There's the kind of green layer, and at this point, everything is as you would expect. All seems pretty good. Keeping an eye on my handset, and I think in any moment now, I am going to get a beeping, and there we go. I'm telling Will that I've got a problem, and you can probably just see in the left-hand corner of your screen, the handset is flashing red, and what it's giving me is a CO2 alert. So it's telling me there's two levels of alarm on an AP inspiration. There's a CO2 alert and a CO2 bailout. This is the former, but obviously it's really early on in the dive. I'm really shallow. There is an opportunity for me to do something about this, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to get out the water and just check that everything is okay inside my head. And when I get out, what I actually find is that the O-ring has got a slight kink in it. I don't know how that happens. It's possible that happened when I actually dismantled it when I'm back on the surface. I don't know, but what I do is I put it all back together again and refit it, do my tests. So I do a positive and a negative, and I get back in the water. And as you've already seen, it performs absolutely flawlessly. So I can't say for certain that the CO2 alarm saved me from a CO2 hit, but you would indicate you would expect that it probably has. And clear for this dive, as you've seen at the bottom, we were working really, really hard. So therefore, the risk, a CO2 risk, was particularly high. So actually, in my view, this was a sensible thing to do at this point. Is I got a CO2 alarm, was not to carry on with the dive, was to get out of the water, have a look at it, see if I could sort it out, and then get back in again. As you can see here, the surface crew are really, really switched on. They're on me like a shot basically, and picking me up and getting me out of the water. And fair call to them, because sometimes skippers, as soon as they've got the divers in and the divers are down, particularly on a long dive, they think, oh, I can go to sleep for an hour or two because nothing's going to happen. But actually, it's really nice that they were paying attention and can get me out of the water nice and quickly. So it was, this kind of level of support for a diver is really good to know that you've got it. And yeah, so there we go. That was my CO2 alarm. I don't think they expected me to get back in, but I was really, really keen to do this dive. And obviously that's what I did. I got out. I quickly stripped down the head, quickly had a look at everything inside, put it all back together again, did my positive and negative, got kitted back up and was back in the water. And as you've already seen at the beginning of this dive, Will sat on the shot line and waited for me to get in. So you can see as I get out of the water, everyone wants to know what's going on, and you can actually hear me talk now.
Just the top one, please. Just the top clip. Yeah. CO2 alarm. The lazy is on. I don't know. Is Will still in there? Is he? Yeah, the shots, it's gone straight down, so it's vertical. So I'll be able to fix that on when I go back in, or give it to Will, or give it to Steve. Okay. I mean, I'm hoping that I'll just take my loop apart again and be able to put it back together and go in again.
And as you've seen, that's exactly what happened. Managed to get in, managed to get down, managed to do the dive. Was really pleased about that, and what a cracker. Absolute cracker it was. In fact, it was so good that we came back several years later, had another go at it. Unfortunately, I didn't get a conclusive identity, but we got enough information out of it, so I think we know what it is. And I'll just finish by saying once again, if you haven't seen the video of the second dive, you should definitely do that. And there's a link in the description. There's a link above me. Other than that, it was a storming day at sea, and I'd particularly like to thank Steve and Barbara Mortimer, who organised these Gasparados dives. It was an absolute belter. As for everyone else, well, as always, please give us a like, leave us a comment, and I will look forward to seeing you on the next one.